Let's now take a look at a few examples. I'd like to compute the inverse sine of 1. So again, the easiest way to do this is to think backwards. So if inverse sine of 1 is t, that would be the same as saying sine t equals 1. And so I'd say to myself, what angle gives me a value of 1? And I need to be between negative 90 and 90. Now remember, with the 1s and the 0s, I can think about my unit circle. And so sine is the y value, and on my unit circle, the y value is 1 when I'm at 90 degrees. So what this now tells me is the inverse sine of 1 is 90 degrees. Inverse sine of a half. Well, again, this one, although I could use my unit circle, this is one where I need to use one of my special values. So again, I don't think well in the inverse notation, so I convert this to the quote-unquote regular sine notation. So if inverse sine of a half is t, then sine of t is 1/2. And again, t needs to be between negative 90 and 90. And so I ask myself, I say, self, what angle, when I did sine of what did I get 1/2? And hopefully I remember it's 30 degrees. So then that would tell me that the sine of 30 is 1/2, so the inverse sine of 1/2 is 30 degrees. Now I decided to use the arc notation just to be familiar with it a little bit more. So I'd like to compute the arc sine of negative 1/2. And so the arc sine is the same as the inverse sine. And so if the inverse sine of negative 1/2 is some value, call it t, then sine t is negative 1/2 in the negative 90 to 90 region. Well, hopefully you remember that the angle that gives us a sine value of negative 1/2 would be an angle in quadrant 4. And remember, we need to use it as a negative angle. So if I'm a negative angle, it would be negative 30, because remember the symmetry that we have on a circle. So the positive 30 gave us a half. The negative 30 gives us negative 1/2 when we need to be in that negative 90 to 90. So the inverse sine of negative 1/2 is negative 30 degrees. Lastly, our last example, suppose I want arctan of 1. Again, arctan is the same as my inverse tan notation. So if inverse tan of 1 is something, we'll call it t, then we're really looking to find out what value has a tangent of t equal to 1, what angle. And hopefully you remember that the angle that gives us a tangent value of 1 is 45 degrees. Remember, the sine and the cosine are both root 2 over 2, and when we divide them, it gives us 1. So the tangent of 45 is 1, so therefore the inverse tangent of 1 is 45 degrees.